We are excited to talk to you about Agile marketing today. So a little bit more about our background. We've been consulting companies and how to apply these Agile techniques to getting products out to market faster. So a lot of these huge companies have big IT departments, they're trying to launch products, and they're finding that they're not always very efficient. And not just that, but they're finding that their projects are taking longer, they're not meeting their deadlines, and they're completely blowing their budgets. Has anyone else been on a project like that? Yeah, a lot of times things will take a lot longer than we thought, and unknowns come up. So what we've been doing is consulting these businesses over the last several years on how to apply these techniques, not just to get to market faster with their product, but also to apply it to marketing.
Yeah, so the basic gist of it is that every single business, if it's one person or if it's 5,000 people, has the same issues, right? So being on time, everybody's pretty much always late. The more people you have, the later you are. Being on budget, the more people you have, the more over budget you tend to go. So when these problems come for a company that has 5,000 employees, it's a big problem, right? They're bleeding cash everywhere. So everything that we had to solve very quickly to stop the bleeding.
Now, there's an article written in Forbes a few years back, and they were talking about the difference between Agile and the traditional approach you might use to manage a project. I mean, most of the time, we want to plan something out to do. We're going to sit down and say, okay, what do I need to do? Let's list everything out, and let's start to get an idea for the whole scope of all of that. But the challenge with that is that we've got today's view of the opportunity. So we're like, well, here's what I can see knowing everything I know now. But often, there's so much that's going to be changing. So when we use an Agile approach, we know there's going to be change. So we want to say, what can we do in the near future and start to work in this way? And then we're going to take whatever learning that we have, the empirical evidence of what happened, and then plan the next increment of time. And by using this incremental approach, we can go further than we might have thought. So when we look at the Agile marketing content, what's interesting is that we've seen that across a variety of different companies, across different industries, geographic locations. We've actually found that a lot of companies have a lot of similar challenges. Now, does that sound like what you would have thought, or would anyone have thought maybe things were different? Sometimes we get a mixed room, and you think, most businesses, it goes back to the core functions of making those sales, right? Connecting with the ideal customer. So a lot of times, these businesses are finding that the way they've worked and that they used to work isn't necessarily going to help them in the future to get to where they want to go now. Has anyone had things change drastically in how you market from when you first started your business till now? Right, that's like just about every hand, yeah. So when we're talking about this concept of a traditional approach versus Agile, we wanted to paint the picture of what we mean by that. So let's say you're launching a website. Has anyone worked on a painful website project? Where it just went on, yes, I feel your pain. It just went on, and it was never ending, and it's 5 or 6 months longer than you think it should have been, and you're like, why is that so complex? Well, usually what happens is we're going through and we're planning out all the requirements up front. Then we're going through the design, trying to get everything just perfect. Then as we go into development and actually start to create the site, we want to test everything before we launch it. So that's the traditional approach that a lot of companies fall into the trap of, thinking, okay, it's just as easy as one step after the other, right? But then when things change or we have delays, it's just going to push out that end date. So what we really want to do is we want to still go through this cycle, but we want to do it for an increment at a time. So we want to say, hey, let's get the homepage up, and let's make that live so people can at least see who we are and what we do. And let's go back and go through that whole cycle again for the services. Then let's go back and build the back-end database, but let's not wait to even get the homepage up to, we have to have everything there. So that's the different way of thinking. When we talk about Agile, we want to be flexible, we want to adapt to changes in the market, and we want to use this iterative approach. So we talk about this concept of the minimum viable product. And when you're looking at this concept, companies have been applying this to how they develop products for quite some time. But now we're seeing that they go into a traditional marketing cycle and they lose all those benefits because they're trying to plan everything out, get the big campaign, shoot all the footage that they need, get all the ad copy done, and do that big bang release at the end of that planning cycle. And it's going to be that much longer before we have any actual data of what's the real results. Do these customers even like what we're putting out there? So we want to start to take this agile approach and apply it to marketing as well. So we're cycling through as we develop a product, get it out there as fast as we can, and start split testing and see the real result of what people think of our marketing campaigns. And this might seem like it makes a lot of sense, and as a true entrepreneur, this might be how you think, but the challenge that we're seeing is that companies may intend to do that, but the reality is so much different. And so we have companies that they'll wait 3 to 4 months to launch a real campaign. That's a quarter of a year. So we're waiting a quarter of a year to even see if people like the messaging. So what we want to do is actually break that down into smaller increments and get the campaigns out faster. And one really good way to look at this is with the heart of Agile. It's really at the core of what we're talking about and how to think different and work different. And when we started putting together the Agile marketing content, we found that this really made a lot of sense and also kept it very simple to just go through these 4 steps. And I'll let Nick talk about this in more detail.
So there's a lot of stuff, right? We've just said a ton of words really quickly about a lot of things that are happening in the company, right? And that's probably our biggest problem, is that the bigger the company gets, the more stuff is happening. And stuff is dangerous, right? Because you never know what stuff is important. So you just do a lot of stuff. And what happens is you lose sort of priority, right? What stuff matters. So what was cool is that Alistair sat down and he was like, listen, I don't want to just make this easier, I want to make this radically simplistic. Like I want to cut everything into 4 boxes, right? Because how do I know what to do every day? So he said, okay, there's only 4 things you actually ever really do that matter. You collaborate, you find people of a like mind or a different way of thinking about the same thing, and you work with them to kind of hone through the idea and get to where you need to be, right? You're a lot smarter as a group. Then there's delivery. You got to make something, right? If you're in business and you don't do something, it's meaningless to be in business. No one needs you. You have no value if you don't deliver something. Then there's reflection, actually taking time to step back and look at how do you communicate with others, how do you collaborate, and how do you deliver? Do you do it well? Are there things you could do differently? And then time for improvement, right? And you can do that every day. You can cycle through every day with time for collaboration, time for delivery, time for reflection, and time for improvement. And what's funny is when you start to do that, you'll realize that every day almost functions like a cycle. And at the end of that cycle is improvement. And why is that important? Because when we start off doing something, we suck at it. I don't care who you are, unless you're Maria. When you do something the first time, you should have no idea how to do it. And what happens is each time you do it, you learn a little bit more, right? In corporate, they have this really weird thing. They call it a Gestalt round trip. It means that you've done the entire thing from front to back all the way through once. And most people can't do anything until they've done that first, right? Which kind of puts you in a weird catch-22. I can't do it until I've done it. So what this does is it lets us break it into a single day cycle. And what's cool about this is when you talk about marketing, right, we have large systems and then we have small campaigns. And they fit together, right? This is one of the things that we said that you guys all know and that freaked out everybody in corporate. We said, guess what, guys? There's no sales and marketing. There's a big software system that everybody's either working on or they're wasting everyone's time, right? The salespeople are part of the funnel. The marketers are part of the funnel. The dev team's part of the funnel. That's all marketing is anymore. That's all sales is. It's everything moving through one system of ifs and thens. If they click this, send them here. If they ask for this, call them. If they don't answer the phone, send them the sequence, right? It's a software system. And Agile was designed to build software systems. So why wouldn't it work to take care of marketing? If all marketing is a software system, which everyone in this room is aware of, or you wouldn't be here, right? We all know this. Who in the room has built a funnel or has at least seen a funnel? Everyone? So you're aware that if something isn't part of that system, it's probably wasting time and or budget, right? It's just not fitting in. So when you start looking at the fact that you have this funnel system, you have the ability to review data, you can split test like Matt was talking about. You could split test 8,000 times, and how much more would you know afterwards? Know a lot more. But what's more important is you could write user stories. You can sit down and say, what is an ideal customer? Because that's the mistake we all make when we first start off in business. We think everybody needs us for everything. And we want to be everything to everyone. And that's a huge problem, because when you try to be everything to everyone, you are nothing to no one. So you want to sit down and you want to think about who is your ideal customer. Write a user story. This is a person who needs me to solve a specific problem because of real pain they deal with from it. That person will be a great customer, right? They'll be happy to pay you. They'll listen to what you have to say. And the odds are they'll probably follow through with your instructions. And guess what? They'll probably brag about how much you've helped them. But if you don't look for ideal customers, if you just look at, I want to make sure that everyone that could possibly ever buy from me buys from me, not am I qualifying people the right way to make sure this fits and solves a need, a problem for them, then you're putting yourself in a bad position. Now, here's what's interesting about all of this. We all know this to be fact, right? We know that the funnel system is everything. And yet somehow, we're all dealing with the exact same problem every day, no matter how big the company is. There's no communication between sales and between marketing and between dev. Even though we know all three of these departments are actually working on the same thing, they don't talk. A salesperson picks up the phone and they have no idea what happened before they got to that call, right? You don't know. You don't know what your prospect said to these messages or how they interpreted them or if they read these specific emails. You know nothing. A phone call came through. So as a salesperson, as part of that system, you don't feel aware of the system, right? How are you supposed to optimize yourself into that funnel if you're not aware of what's going on before you pick up a call, before you interact with a prospect or a customer? That's a problem that every single one of us has dealt with for a long time, and I couldn't see anyone working on a solution for. Do we have another slide? Look, I don't usually look like a Mario brother, but I did come to... I appreciate that. I came right here from a Halloween party. I haven't even slept yet. So I just want you guys to know that this was important to me. I made a promise to be here, and no matter what happens, I always show up when I give my word.
And Nick, you're a great Doc Holliday.
I was a great Doc Holliday. Oh, you should have heard the cough, too. I need to have another cigarette just so you guys can hear it. It's so authentic to tuberculosis. It's fantastic. So, what numbers matter to the business, right? In corporate, we have so many people doing so many things that we have to start to hone down on some numbers that matter, right? You guys all watch Shark Tank? How often do they refuse to give somebody money because of one reason? You don't know your numbers, right? And then we sit there and go, well, but what are those numbers they're talking about? Which ones? Well, there's three. There's three really big ones. There's CPA, cost per acquisition. What does it cost you to buy somebody to work with you, right? You can buy a customer, especially if you have your stuff dialed in and you have your systems in place. You know exactly what that number is. Second number is, what does it cost to service and fulfill that customer? Third number is, what is the lifetime value of that customer relationship? That's it. Your business is those three numbers. If you know them, you can calculate your growth, project it, and dial it in. If you don't know them, you are walking around blind, just feeling through. Like a blind midget at an orgy, you're just gonna kind of wander through and feel it out. So those numbers, especially CPA, which is the one that as sales and marketing people we deal with, right? How do you solve CPA? And CPA comes from a lot of different things. CPA comes from the cost of a lead, which comes from the cost of a click. And then the cost of a lead has to go to salespeople, and somewhere in there's a conversion ratio, and there's things that make that up, and there's messages that make that up. And through that whole process, there's all these different little KPIs, key performance indicators, that all add up to that CPA. Now the problem with that is, how do I track all those factors to dial in the CPA? If my CPA is off, and I don't know which number in that equation is causing it because I can't see them, then how do I fix it? And in a lot of situations, especially with these big guys, you've got a call center, a huge floor of salespeople, and a massive amount of marketing happening, and everything is disconnected. But here's what's funny. Even our business, which is like 8 people, has the same problem. I constantly pick up the phone on a client and have no idea what happened before they got there. So how do I fix that, right? Well, luckily, we're Agilists. We hang out with software developers all day, every day. In fact, someone made a joke at the last conference we were at. All the software developers in the world were in one place. If that place got bombed, it would be the worst terror attack in history. No one could use their phones ever again. Slide.
So, well, if you guys were to go on Shark Tank, would Mr. Wonderful take your answer? Would you know your numbers? Or would he tell you to, like leave, walk out? What do you guys think?
Who here knows their CPA?
I'm seeing chuckles, Nick. I'm not seeing confidence. I'm seeing some heads going like this.
Nobody? What if I told you I know mine every single month over month, exactly what it is?
You're bragging.
I am bragging. Because I have so much. Do you know how much easier? I can go days without sleep because when I sleep so soundly knowing exactly what that number is. So how to calculate cost of acquisition, right? Like we talked about, you have to track every single number along the path. You have to have some transparency, but more importantly, you have to have some accountability. This is where things get tricky, right? The second you start hiring people, you realize that a lot of people pound sand. They look busy and they're not actually doing anything, and that's a huge problem. Because how am I supposed to dial in or calculate a number if I can't get an accurate assessment of what you're doing? right? So, imagine if your sales and marketing was in perfect sync. How would your business change? That's the only question I'm going to ask you guys today. That's it, just one. Maybe a second one. I don't know. I might change my mind. But if you knew that, would it be easier to run the business? If you knew exactly what was going on from the time that person hit the first landing page to the time they converted, and every single thing that was said in between, would it make your business easier to run? If the whole front end could be transparent to you, and everybody in that process had accountability, would you feel better about your business? Do you think you could plot your growth maybe? Yeah? Absolutely.
You know, Nick, I think it might be kind of cool to share a case study, like
Sure.
with the rehab centers. Like, there's a lot of times you'll have businesses that have been in business for so many years, so many decades, that they have a way that they do things, right? And it's the same system, the same process. But when you look at the status quo, I mean, most of the time we want growth, right? And how long can we stay in business if we just stay the same? So in order to get somewhere different, you have to do something drastically different. And we were just talking about how much technology has changed. There's new platforms, new algorithms, new ways of doing marketing. So not only do we have to be agile and adapt to how we're marketing, but even just looking at the industry and what other people are doing as well.
So they compare themselves to each other, which is pretty normal, right? I'm an old type of business. The rehab business is an old business. It's been around since about as long as Vegas has been around. Actually, the same people started both. I hope you guys know that. So that's where the drug rehab business came from. And what's neat about it is drug rehab.
I thought you said rehab.
No, we're not rehabbing houses, we're rehabbing people. Yeah. So we've got drug rehabilitation. And what's interesting about it is it's an insurance-based sale, right? So the average ticket in that is a 30-day treatment that costs about 30 grand and is paid by insurance PPO. So these people are very comfortable paying a very high cost per acquisition, right? Because the lifetime value is high. 30 grand, that's a lot of money. So they've traditionally been okay spending anywhere from 5 to 10 grand to get someone into a bed, right? Because once they're in the bed, if they've got the right insurance, they're qualified, they're going to pull 30 grand out of them. So it's fine to pay that much to get that person. And the industry status quo was that that's acceptable, right? Hey, as long as we're under 5 grand, it's acceptable. Well, over time, things change. Insurance starts cutting back what they're willing to pay out. Now, all of a sudden, that $30,000 client's only worth, 15. Well, now that number of, hey, 10 is 3x is all of a sudden, hey, now if it's at 10, we're only making a 50% margin. Oh, that's bad. That's real bad. You still have to pay nurses, you have to pay for everything else. And remember, it's a business. Those numbers are an equation. They kick out a percentage of return, a return on investment, ROI, the only number any of our clients ever care about, right? That's the important one. So we go to them, and we take a system, very simply put, and we stick a system onto the back end that gives full transparency and accountability across the board. Something they've never had, right? Their call center has no idea what the marketing people do. Now, that does a couple of things. Right off the bat, it changes a lot of conversion metrics for them. Because right off the bat, they know the second they pick up the phone that person has interacted with certain things, that person has been qualified, that person has the proper insurance, right? So now the way they pitch changes. All of a sudden, Unity goes from having a cost of customer acquisition right in the industry average of around $4,800, but they were really proud of $4,800, and it comes down to $2,400. And they're freaking out. They're like, this is amazing. Like, yeah, it's cool, but it's not everything we can do, right? There's more we can do. Now, I'm sure you guys realize that all of you are walking around with something that's listening to you every day, right? Your phone tracks everything you do. And what's crazy about that is certain people, I may know some of them, but certain people collect that information. We may collect somewhere in the neighborhood of 50 to 75 different things that you do every single day on your Alexa, on your TV, on your phone, in your car now because you've connected them in there too. And we may be watching you. And we may use that data to figure out some really interesting things, right? Namely, what you're gonna do. So here's what's cool. A big decision creates a mental wake, right? So the bigger the decision, the more expensive the decision, the harder it is to make, the more you do leading up to that decision. And the more, because it's the same decision, of the behavior is the same from person to person. So what we did is we took IBM's Watson, it's a machine learning engine, and we connected it on the back end to all of that data being pulled in. Then we connected that to the conversion system. So now what happens? It starts to learn. It starts to learn what a person does before they buy. And it starts to calculate what pattern has an 80% likelihood of being ready to make a purchase. Now imagine if you took that data and then overlaid onto it the exact insurance data you needed to have an active customer. And imagine you started only running your ads to people who you know were going to need to go into drug treatment in the next 30 days and had proper PPO insurance. Their cost of customer acquisition dropped down to $700. They are very happy. We have now filled every bed they have, and we spent half the budget they used to spend. Unless they buy more hospitals, they have no other use for us. We have maxed out what we can take from them money-wise. It's $400,000 a month. I'm very happy. They're very happy. No one's mad. So, $400,000. That's what we're charging them. Don't even worry about who the client is. But they're very happy. Let's just say, because like I said, by those numbers, they're pulling in about $15K per, so they're seeing about a 20x return. So they're very, very, very happy right now. Yeah. Now, what's cool about that is in the process of doing that, I learned a bunch of stuff, right? I validated a bunch of data and information. Now, they're so happy, and I've maxed out what they can buy from me, that they actually took me to a conference, right, at the Breakers in West Palm Beach last month to show off to the rest of the industry what I did for them. So now I have my phone ringing off the hook from the other places because they're like, listen, I know Unity has no more beds. We've got hundreds. What's the capacity on this? And the reality is the capacity is the market, right? I'm measuring 280 million Americans every day. Every single day. That's what, 82% of the marketplace? I know what you're going to do before you do. I monitor myself, to be totally honest with you. I just want to know what I'm thinking every day. So I've had Watson processing my own data for quite some time. So
Can I get a report on that?
you can absolutely, and I want you to burn it after reading. So, do we have another slide? I think
Yeah,
there's
well,
another
but
one.
Nick, one other thing to touch on here I think is important is not only can we look at what are like the 10 common steps people take before they make a purchase because it's all trackable, but what about before people stop using a service and some of the other
Absolutely.
industries?
So, a large national telecommunications company may have asked us to do exactly that, right? They may have said, hey, we want to know when people are going to leave us, right? And I said, well, that's pretty easy to figure out. Let's hook up this little tracking piece, and every time somebody leaves you, it's going to go back in time and look at the 90 days before they left you and see everything that they did beforehand. And what's going to happen is every time that happens, it's going to lay those behaviors on top of each other. And so within about 90 days, we'll have created what's called a closed-loop analysis, and we'll know exactly what gives a person an 80% likelihood of leaving your service. Now, if I came to you every month and I said, hey, here's the people that are going to leave you, market to them specifically so they don't, and this way you can keep your retention numbers up, that'd be very valuable, right? What's the most valuable customer? Not having to sell a new one, keep the one you got. So this was very, very, very valuable to them. I can't charge as much as I can charge Unity, but I charge them a good amount of money. It's a six-figure amount, and every month they get a nice little email sent to their marketing department that says, here's your customers that are mentally in the mood to probably leave in the next 30 days. You might want to get in front of that, right? So what this does is it really changes the conversation and the context around how marketing and sales works. Because if we know the mindset of the customer before we ever interact with them, the marketing is different, right? And if we can sort of curtail that system and curtail that messaging around where they're at when they start, then by the time they get to sales, everything works a lot easier. Now, why is this difficult? Well, it's difficult because every single day, no matter what size company you are, you use a bunch of different stuff to interact with people, right? Your salespeople are on Salesforce, and they're on Pipedrive, and they're using HubSpot. Your marketers are using Google Ads, and they're using lead pages, and they're using ClickFunnels, and they're using Facebook. And all of these things are in different places. They have different logins, they have different screens, information is going from different things, right? So what we did is we built a piece of software that actually took everything from all of them. Every single point of communication that happens from the first time they click until they've been, and as long as they're buying from you, from your entire database, is slimmed down to a single screen. We call it WooSender. And the reason we call it WooSender is the very first sales call we ever had on this product. We were talking to a roofer because we figured a roof was a large we had figured out that as a large purchase, we could track a roof. So we were like, listen, we have this system, we want to bring it to your business. It's a real blue-collar guy. And we break it all down for him, and he's like, what is this going to cost me? And we tell him, it was not a lot of money. And the guy gets real quiet. And you're a good salesperson, you don't talk when they get quiet. You wait for them to say something, he just goes, woo, that's a lot of money. And I realized that this may not be a technology for small businesses, right, unless it was built to do it for them. So we had to change everything about the way that worked. Now, if you take a look at the way we put this together, we're able to get a single unified screen. When a call comes in, right, every email, every text message, every interaction through every single system, be it Facebook chat or the Google ads that they saw to get in there is all kept in a single chronological timeline. It's all being pulled into one place. And it opens the second the phone call connects, if it's outbound or inbound. Now, what that does is it gives us metrics across everything. It tells us which salespeople are closing at which ratios. It tells us which campaigns are functioning the best. It tells us which parts of the funnel are broken so we can actually track those KPI numbers across every single part of the process. Because let's be honest, it's a formula, right? Pieces make it up. And if you look at each piece individually and the sum of the parts of the whole, we start to understand how to dial that system in. Like we talked about earlier, collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve. You cannot reflect without data, right? Data affects every facet of your life and business. Having it all in one place makes a huge difference. Having all the tools in one place makes a huge difference. This software is able to actually run everything from the power dialing call center applications down through the CRM applications. Now, why does it do that when you already have those systems? Because if it can run as an overlay with redundancy, it can make sure that across everything, the back end of Watson is seeing what works the best and putting forward the best conversion optimized messaging. This is our campaign builder. I spent a lot of time dealing with a lot of other systems, and this thing will actually, now here's what's interesting about it. When you put campaigns together in here, it will automatically populate them across the system. What this means is no matter which systems you're already using, once WooSender is hooked in, if you want to add new things, try new things, you don't have to be an Infusionsoft expert. You don't have to know Salesforce. You don't have to know anything. All you have to do is say, hey, there's another thing I want to try. I want to add a text message. I want to add an email. I want to add in a voicemail drop. You select it, you drop it. See, it already has the sequence of what you already have built because it's aggregating information in. So it gives you this ability to start adding and testing more things. And who here thought, after listening to Matt, that maybe you should test more stuff? I'm going to start split testing bagel toppings, like everything. I'm going to see if that affects my numbers every day. So having that information, having that ability to test, you guys see how that can make a difference? How maybe this would help every single person that you work with and your own companies?
What about non-internet type marketing? What if you threw in some radio spots on that? Can that go through that to measure that?
Call monitoring. It has call monitoring. Okay. So if you run a radio ad, right? Sure. And I put a unique phone number that I generate through the software, and I stick that in that radio ad, all of a sudden I know everything that came from that radio ad. Right? It's tagged and ID'd. There is nothing that we cannot tag, ID, and track.
I have a question here. Has anyone here ever feel a little overwhelmed with all the things you need to do to keep up with marketing? Right? My hand is up. It feels like there's so much. Even just looking at social media alone, which platform? When do you post? What time of day? All of that, right? Not to mention buying ads. Now you're financially investing in ad spend. And has anyone here, and this is kind of like one of those moments where we're not proud of it, but have you ever just not followed up with people that were like a hot lead, even a warm lead, maybe even like a little cold, but you find this email or this message later and you're like, crap, that was like right there this whole time, right? And how many times does that happen where we're just not consistent? And consistency is what probably would have helped us get how many more sales. I was just talking with Tom Beal on the break, and we were talking about entrepreneur mindset and how to get to the next level. And in that conversation, one of the things he said, he just mentioned the word consistency. I remember that just kept ringing in my head. I was like, whoa, he's so right. Like literally just that consistency can be so incredibly powerful. And that's not rocket surgery, right? That's just following the same steps. So one of the things I really like about these campaigns is it helps you stalk people like really effectively in like a great marketing way. So if you're trying to reach out to someone and you don't get responses to your emails, well, what happens if they get a text message? What happens if then they have a voicemail? You can actually, each one of these are different types of messages. So you have an email you can preload. 2 days later, they get a text. Then they get a voicemail. And you literally can pre-record that in the system. Hey, just wanted to check if you saw my email yesterday. And what happens, right? Once you touch that customer 2, 3, 4 times, oh man, this person is calling me. I better get back to them, right? Makes it a lot more active, and it helps you to be proactive so you don't have to remember to follow up with each and every person every day.
There are no perfect salespeople, right? Because what makes a perfect salesperson is a perfect pitch and perfect follow-up. And I've seen people that have one or the other, but I've never seen anyone with both. And what's cool is that you can teach a perfect pitch, right? You can beat that into somebody. But getting them to have perfect follow-up is almost impossible. The system will ensure that everyone has perfect follow-up. That means that your job becomes simply making sure they say the words correctly with the right pitch, the right cadence, the right speed, and the right order. That's a lot easier to do, right? The less you have to figure out and solve, the easier it is to dial things in. The more you can isolate single factors, the more you can start fixing and making solo improvements, right? If every day we're focused on collaborate, deliver, reflect, and improve, and we isolate down to one simple thing that we can do that on every day, then our business is always getting better. And what's crazy about what we do for a living is that we're dealing with these gigantic companies that want to be continuously improving. And when someone comes to you and says, hey, I want a 20% boost in sales, it doesn't sound like a big deal, right? Until they tell you they do 1.4 billion a year already. Then it's a problem. 20%'s a big number then, right? So we have to deal with how do you get these guys that are huge and slow and for a lot of times broken. We found out the other day that there was the reason deliveries were going out for a company we're working with was because of the necessary watering schedule of horses at the time that they were using horses for the delivery. Still part of their company culture, and no one there knew, right? It happens. Transparency and accountability is everything. When I got into Agile, I took to it like a fish to water, and it was because as somebody who had been a sales manager almost my entire life, I've been a sales manager since I was 16 years old. It's the only thing I've ever done, right? Which is why it was weird when Maria was like, I'm gonna teach you how to talk, and I was like, listen, I have said so many words in my life. I was born on the phone, and I will probably die in a phone room. Like, this is what I know.
Sometimes different words, Nick.
Sometimes different words.
Slightly more corporate words.
So, not really my strong suit. But what I can tell you is this. The first two words she told me, she goes, it's all about transparency and accountability. I was like, awesome, so corporate's got some TNA, that's awesome. Like, I like it, right? Not the one they thought, but I've come to really value those two things, right? Because one of the hardest things that I had to deal with every time I've tried to start a business, and I can tell you guys, I've had 11 businesses, 3 of them did well, okay? What does that mean? That means 8 of them failed miserably. 8 of them had times where I was literally naked on the floor of my shower crying, okay? Like that scene, and it happens. And it's because I brought people in that I cared about, right, to an idea that was mine, and I did not have the tools to manage it properly. And that's one of the worst things in the world, right? Because then you feel like a failure. And the best way to avoid that is transparency and accountability, because you cannot manage if you cannot see, right? You cannot hold people to a better standard if there's no accountability to begin with. You cannot improve without those two things.
Because a lot of the times we're guessing, right?
Most of the time we're guessing.
Most of the time we're guessing, right?
But here's what's cool about guessing and tracking it. Then it's science, right? If I just guess everywhere, then I'm just guessing. But if I take guesses and I write them down, and I start looking at the results of each of those guesses, then I'm doing science, right? Then I'm getting somewhere. Then I'm making steps forward. And that's what's cool about it, is the only difference between guessing and working is keeping track of everything. That's it.
That sounds a lot more like intentional.
Intention.
As a responsible adult owning a business.
Probably. I'm getting there.
So basically, as we're talking about these concepts and the transparency and accountability, does anyone here feel like it would be helpful to have more visibility into where your leads are coming from and being able to follow up with them? Would that be something that would be helpful across all these different platforms and ways of reaching customers? One of the things we wanted to put together is a special offer for you guys for $0, absolutely free. Do I have your attention? I think I do. I saw pens come out. Go to woocenter.com/agile, and I'd like to encourage you to actually set your pen down and pick up your phone and go there right now. Because what we'd like to offer you is to be able to use WooSender and test that functionality with your clients for no cost for 14 days. Would that be cool? Yeah. Nick, I don't know if they...
You guys, I just explained that there's no pain of disconnect. You're not shutting anything off. You're just turning this thing on for 14 days and trying it. If you don't want to try it, we can take it away. I can turn the screen off. If you actually want it, though, go get it now, because I'm not selling it to you. I honestly don't care if anybody doesn't use it. You know, it's going to make you some money.
One of the coolest things I like about this is that for so long, we've talked about agile marketing as a concept, as a methodology, and here's how you work in a different way. Here's how you plan out what you're going to do in shorter increments. You do the split tests, and then you get more empirical data to be able to make decisions off of. Like, that's what we've been talking about for years, but now we finally have a tool that can help you do that, because you can see the actual what's happening across so many different ways of contacting customers. So, love seeing the phones. I don't think I've ever said that in a presentation, Nick, ever.
No. Actually, Maria usually gets really upset about phones. You just go to the...
Nope, just go to the website, because we want you to have this. When you leave an event, there's so much information that you have, and it sometimes is a little bit much to wrap your head around what you're going to do first. So we want you to go to woocenter.com/agile, and this is going to get you the 14 days for free. Just type in your email, and you will be able to access the system and start to see all the ways you can bring your platforms together and track your customers and leads across everything.
There are so few buttons and tabs in there, it's going to mess you guys up a little bit. But it was designed to be radically simplistic, right? That's the reason it exists, is because if things are difficult, oftentimes we won't do them. That's the reality. So hopefully this is easy enough. I'm not asking you guys for anything. I'm offering you the ability to try something that works for us. And hopefully you guys help us develop it further to be better. You know, we've had a lot of time to make it better for big companies. We're really excited to see how it starts affecting some of the small ones.
So we'd like to open up the floor for some questions. Oh, there we go. Yes.
So somehow it appears that you have solved the attribution problem, which has been, somehow it seems you've solved the attribution problem, which has been the eternal bane of internet marketers. Where and how did the lead get developed? So what you're saying is that you somehow have to be connected to all of these platforms out there. So what's the method for you to get that access? And then the second question that I have, which is slightly different, the premise that you made for the importance of this is that you don't know how that individual got to the person picking up the phone when they call.
Correct.
But it would seem to me that that person has to have the training to understand that data when they're looking at the information in front of them. It would seem you have to have some pretty high-quality people in order to have the ability to train them and react properly to the data, or that's not worthwhile. So,
well, here's the exciting thing, right? When you pick up the phone, as long as you're used to seeing a thread, and the thing is, we're all so used to our phones that we see a thread every day. Mark, go back a couple slides. Let's see the thread real quick. Right here. So it's going to look like any thread on any text message that exists. The only difference is, I'm going to jump down here. Ha! This actually says SMS. It's very blurry. This says email. It's a little blurry. But above each one of these interactions in the thread is what you sent them and from where, right? And then on this side of the thread, you'll see gray, just like when you're texting with somebody, right? Gray, purple, gray, purple, gray, purple, green. It's going to show as if this were one stream of conversation, right? So anybody who's had a Facebook conversation where they've had text and audio and pictures and everything else mixed into that one conversation is used to this format of thread.
oh, so this is the information on conversations they've had with your
Every single point of interaction is now reduced into this thread.
Yeah, it's not the conversation they had related to your company to their friends.
No.
Okay.
We're not allowed to share that data with you. If we started pulling your conversations out of the phones and actually, and now that's the other trick, guys. No, that's the other trick, right? So we would probably be in jail right now if I was just sitting there listening to everybody's phones. We don't actually do that, and I probably should have clarified that. The reason we use Watson is that there's a SHA-256 encrypted pixel system that's actually blind feeding all this information back into Watson, right? We don't look at it. We don't even know what factors it's adding up, because that would be a violation of your personal privacy. Right? All we know is that according to Watson, you have an 80% likelihood of conversion, and here's your hash code. I don't even know whose hash code it is. I just know that that person fits this thing that I need bought. And as long as I keep doing it that way, I am legally in the clear. At least that's what their legal team says. I'm watching everything. It's exciting.
Starting a new company and determining which of the CRMs and all the different things to utilize. I mean, this doesn't have those.
It does all of it, actually.
Oh, it does all of that.
Oh, yeah.
As you smile broadly, just as your mustache goes up. Okay, so literally,
You could use this in place of all of the CRM functionality and most of the marketing functionality. You can, right? If you're small and you don't want, and you're just starting out, I recommend it. Because here's the other thing. most industries, we're using this thing already in our testing, right? So Watson's already developed a bunch of instantaneous campaigns. So you can go in and say, this is my industry, populate me with everything I need, and it'll just, like that.
Wow. IBM for us, huh?
Yeah. It's not quite Skynet yet. It hasn't tried to attack me. I haven't. We'll give it time, you know? Any other questions? Comments, discussion?
Those numbers are crazy. I have a couple clients that are substance abuse counseling, and I know what our CPA is on there, and if I could get them down to $700, I'd be a hero. That's incredible.
Yeah, no, they were like, just come with us to the conference and we will sit at the booth and talk about this. And they just let us run a video of their back end. I'm like, you're letting us show everything. They're like, we don't care. Just.
Yeah, that's awesome.
So that Moment of Change conference, it was really fun, actually.
Any other questions?
I have a question. Can I take a selfie with you?
Absolutely, Jason. Perfect timing.
All right,
Oh,
I
there
have
we
this
go.
Idea.
Okay.
Okay, you in the middle.
Usually where I end up.
Yeah. Hey, can we all get in here?
I think so. Is it a selfie if Tom takes it?
It's an ussy.
Thank you, Jason. All right, so thank you, everyone. It was a pleasure to present on Agile marketing and share some of what we're learning on sales, marketing, and data science together. We want to help you have some tools that you can start to apply to your business. So go ahead and go to woocenter.com/agile, and we look forward to connecting with you and staying in touch and helping you as you grow your businesses. Thank you.